Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host and people's lobbyist, Cornell Wright. Join me and let's talk about the commission to evaluate January 6th.
Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas is intended for the participation of responsible adults of legal drinking age who wish to engage in substantive virtual discussions and social drinking for entertainment purposes only. Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas does not advocate the abuse of alcoholic beverages. Choosing to participate in any of the drinking activities shared in the program should be made with moderation and caution and is the sole responsibility of the user.
Now, cousins, we all, maybe not all of us, some of us were working and weren't able to get to a television, but certainly by this point in time, we've all heard and seen the various news feeds and clips and videos and all sort of thing that happened on January 6th of 2021. Just to remind you, on that day, that was the day that the United States Congress convened at the United States Capitol in order to have the official ratification, counting, whatever the right choice of words are, of the electoral votes associated with the 2020 presidential election, of which then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were duly elected by not only the majority of the population of cousins, but also by the majority electoral college votes for President and Vice President of the United States of America. Cousins, we also saw on that day that prior to the insurrectionists storming our nation's capital, that the ex-president and a number of other speakers were speaking before an amassed group. Cousins who were outfitted, of course, it's wintertime, so they had on a number of bundled items and that sort of thing, but also was kind of curious, there was a lot of military-related gear as well. Shortly thereafter, with the president saying, or the ex-president, pardon my expression, saying, well, let's go down there and change it, then that group of people, group of cousins, then went in and stormed and broke into our nation's capital. Now, cousins, it was a sad day. I was sitting there in total awe, disgust, and anger. Why? Because that had never happened before. Think about the various marches that have occurred in Washington, D.C. that have been highly touted and highly identified. The 1964 march where Martin Luther King made his great speech and others. No one stormed the Capitol. The Black Lives Matter that was in 1920 and 2020 as well. No one stormed the Capitol. I went to the second, March on Washington. No one stormed the Capitol. The Million Man Black Man March on Washington, D.C. No one stormed the Capitol. You understand this, cousins? No one has stormed the Capitol except those group of cousins who were trying to what? Dismantle our democracy and assume that the election that had been properly identified and had been validated in numerous states on numerous occasions under different ways was not correct and sound. Cousins, that was a bad idea. So we look at that, cousins. And so I was curious when I was noticing that, well, gee, why aren't the Republican representatives and Republican senators not in support of understanding or producing a commission that would go deep in order to understand what were the mechanisms and the reasons that led up to that? Well, all of a sudden, cousins, we start to find out that some members of the Republicans in Congress were in fact in communication with the ex-president while the insurrection was occurring at the Capitol. Cousins, that's called reconnaissance. When you're behind the lines and the enemy's approaching, you're giving feedback to command center, that's called reconnaissance. We're telling them what's happening and whether or not it's working. You follow me, cousins? Whether or not it's working, whether or not those cousins, and I'm stretching to call them that, hoping that they're going to change their ways and their perspectives, those cousins were attempting to overthrow our democracy. Is there any other way of looking at that? One congressman I heard had a conversation, It just looked like normal people going through a tour of the Capitol. Well, let me correct that congressman on this. I've spoken with some people that I know who work in the federal government. And they say, and perhaps some of you cousins have been, that when you get a chance to go on a tour of the Capitol, you leave things like your purses and your jackets and your helmets and your military gear in the office of whomever you're sponsoring your visit, your congressman or your senator. And then you're walking through in a casual manner, not running, not disrespecting anything, certainly not stealing anything, and certainly not going to anybody's offices that's off limits to you. And you're ushered by a member of the staff and or the Capitol Police, those folks who were definitely on duty and did us all a great service, okay? Those Capitol Police persons who were there to take care and make sure that everybody there is safe. Cousins, come on. How can we see this any other way? Remember I talked about gaslighting a couple of weeks ago, a couple of episodes? This is maximum gaslighting for anybody to insinuate for one moment that it is not worth understanding in minute detail what happened, why it happened, and how we can do what? Prevent it from happening again. If you don't prevent it from happening again and understand through laws and through other technologies and other kind of capabilities what happened. It wasn't successful, but it'll be a practice run for the future, cousins. The whole idea about the United States of America and our Constitution and we the people and why it's so strong is because we've had hundreds of years of a peaceful delegation and transfer of power from one political party or one person to another. That's what is the essence of the Constitution. That's why it's great. That's why our experiment in democracy is so fulfilling and is, in fact, the beacon for the rest of the world, but only, cousins, if we maintain it. This was a direct affront to that, cousins. A direct affront. There's been nothing to substantiate. Nothing. Think about it, cousin. Nothing has substantiated any of the questions about fraud or inaccurate voting or things being miscounted, none of that across the country for the entire election of 2020 for the president. So why are we still talking about it? We shouldn't be. It's over. The attempt of insurrection, the attempt for having the Department of Justice have impact. Now we're starting to see a number of state legislatures are enacting laws very much aligned with what the ex-president was asking for other states to do that he had lost. That is, change the votes from the people to what we determine to being our elected officials, have them decide who becomes president. Cousins, that's not democracy. I don't know what that is. That's not democracy, and I don't think that's what you and I want. Obviously, there are some people who do want that approach. Democracy is hard, cousins. It requires work. It requires sacrifice. It requires education. It requires engagement. It requires compromise. It requires bringing new ideas to the table to the benefit of whom? We, the people. So if you're not doing that or you're not a part of that, then what are you trying to purport or what are you trying to bring forward as being a better idea? Don't put that in the guise of democracy, cousins, because it's not. Okay? That's not a good idea. So, cousins, we have to reinvigorate ourselves in regards to, one, understanding what our democracy is, two, being able to start to work for it, and three, to support the work coming out of this January 6th commission in order to understand what happened, why did it happen, who was involved, what action should need to be taken against those, because that was on the borderline of treason, if not way over here on the side of treason, depending upon your definition of treason. And more specifically, cousin, think about the laws. There are going to have to be new laws written because the laws that existed were, I would consider, a little too light for the significance of the invasion of our capital. Too light. Talk about law and order. Those laws existing. Oh, they're talking about trespassing. Trespassing. Come on. Hey, that's trespassing. Let me trespass in your house like that and tell me what you think it is. Okay? You think about that, cousin. A lot of the cousins are being identified initially with trespassing. Come on, cousins. We can work. We can do better than that. So, support the commission. Let's be excited to find out what information comes out as a result of their work and their fact-finding. Let them go as far as they need to go to get it done. Let's support the outcome because they're going to be doing the right thing, trying to help preserve our democracy because it was under attack. You think about what's happened in the past with other presidential elections, people who were perhaps in a difficult position, they then accepted for the benefit of the country and the Constitution the results that was not perhaps the most popular, not even the most accurate, but they accepted. This time it wasn't, and we're being tested as to whether or not we really understand and believe and support the Constitution of the United States and what democracy really is. Thank you for joining me, cousins. See you next week on Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. Continue wearing your mask because, hey, like Pogo said, we've met the enemy and he is us. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week.
We are the people. Welcome to the show.